Thank you for joining us for North Star's Private Equity Fast Pitch. Our host, Jeff Henningsen, president of Lockton Companies in Texas, will be speaking with Ken Firtel, the co-founder and managing partner for Transom Capital Group. Prior to joining Transom Capital, Ken served as an investment professional at Platinum Equity. During his tenure there, he was responsible for evaluating, structuring, and negotiating transactions, as well as transitioning and overseeing operations of portfolio companies. Outside of the office, Ken serves on the board of Angel City Sports, an organization focused on providing athletic and other opportunities for children and adults with physical disabilities. Today they'll be discussing how the acronym ARMOR helps in their investment decisions, why Ken believes people in your network can serve as better role models than Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, or George Washington, and why integrity is a critical component in the business world. And now your host, the podfather of private equity, Jeff Henningsen.
Ken, we've been talking about getting together for this podcast for at least 6 months or more and spent some good time on the road together. So I'm glad we're finally getting to do this. Why don't you get us kicked off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and Transom Capital.
Great. And Jeff, obviously, thanks for having me. And we've gotten to know each other well over the last couple of years here. And so I appreciate the invitation to join today. And I'm definitely excited to tell you a little bit about myself and about Transom Capital. So why don't I maybe start at the beginning and tell you a little bit about how we founded the firm and even before then, some of my background. I grew up in San Diego. My father was a research biologist at UCSD, and a lot of his characteristics and traits had an important impact on me and my development and the path that I chose. My mother was a travel agent in San Diego as well growing up, and had the opportunity to go back east for college. So I went to Yale University for college, majored in economics. Coming out of college, had the opportunity to go to London School of Economics, where I did a program in industrial relations. And the key part of that program was really using operational excellence to solve bottlenecks in businesses. And so when I look back personally on Transom Capital and what we do and how we do it, a lot of the initial, seeds of that were planted through my educational career in terms of the economics and the finance background, as well as the using operations and operational excellence to drive results in businesses. So I think it's interesting. People ask me sometimes like, oh, was that a plan? Did you know? Was there some master plan? Speaking honestly, there was no master plan. I think it's just you look back on your life and you kind of see some of the things that led you to where you are today. And I think it's interesting to look back and say, even back then when I didn't really know what I wanted to do and I was sort of going to school and trying to figure things out, a lot of the stuff and a lot of that experience has kind of led me to where I am today. Coming out of London, moved back to Southern California and moved to Los Angeles and went to USC for law school. When I was in law school, I focused almost primarily on transactional classes, other than the bar prep stuff where you had to do some of the litigation and other stuff, but really had a desire to leverage some of the other educational experience that I had and took a lot of classes in and around finance, in and around accounting, in and around bankruptcy law, structuring, negotiation, and things like that. And then coming out of law school, I joined Melvin & Myers, which is a prominent law firm located in Los Angeles. And it was really interesting. When I joined there, it was really at like the heyday of the internet bubble in like the late 90s. And so when I joined there, most of the time what people did is they kind of a track where you were a generalist. You did some transactional and then you did some litigation. But I had a pretty strong perspective by that time that I wanted to focus on transactional. So I went in and said, hey, I only want to do transactional. At the time, as I just said, there was a preponderance of deal flow coming in the venture capital and private equity world. 6 to 9 months into my career, I was able to take more of a leadership role in drafting and negotiating private equity and venture capital type documentation than I would have otherwise. And then over the course of my years at Melvin & Myers, which was really only around 3 years, I realized very quickly that I had a desire to be the person on the other end of the phone and be the person actually negotiating the deal and being on the capital deployment side as opposed to the advisory side of things. Got a call from a friend of mine who I'd gone to graduate school with. He was working at Platinum Equity in Los Angeles, and at the time they had a business and legal affairs role. where you came in and you led the legal side of negotiation, as well as you were sort of a junior deal guy on the deal team. Left to Melvin and Myers, went to Platinum Equity. I was at Platinum Equity for roughly 5 years. And then along the way, I met one of my current partners, a gentleman by the name of Russ Ronick. And Russ was a junior partner at McKinsey. And we came together and we sort of had the idea of doing a operationally focused middle market investment firm. And a lot of the really successful firms that had a operational focus, like a Platinum Equity, were raising larger funds, doing larger deals. And we saw an underbelly of the marketplace where we could come in and fill that hole. And so in 2008, was actually at the end of 2007, we left our respective positions. And in 2008, we launched Transom Capital.
So that was awesome background. And I know we'll get into some advice to college students later. I won't dive into that now, but I think having that history and background is really interesting. I was thinking in my mind, this concept of, does your path guide you to where you're going? Or like you said, do you see the path you went on later and go, oh, that's why I did that? Talk a little bit more about Transom and where you guys are focused in the EBITDA size, industries, and let's dive into some of that area.
Yeah, no, happy to do it. So Transom Capital, as I mentioned a bit ago, we're a operationally focused private equity firm. So what that means to us is we are a hands-on value-added investor. And what we are looking for is we are looking for situations where we feel like someone from our operations team can lean in and we can have a thesis about adding value to the business above and beyond just revenue growth. And the way we approach the market, there's a couple different ways. All firms have their, I don't want to call it somewhat generic kind of targeted acquisition criteria, but we have, from a financial and size perspective, we're typically buying businesses from high single digit EBITDA up to around 60 million of EBITDA. And we're doing that across industry. So we're an industry agnostic investor. Some of our power alleys are in consumer, industrials, relatively broadly defined, business services, relatively broadly defined. Those are three industries where we've done a significant amount of deal flow in recent years, but we're really an industry agnostic investor. We're an equity control investor, so we don't do minority deals. But we like to sort of control the equity, control the board, because once again, we have a pretty clear vision about coming in and we have these value-added approach to investing. And so there's clear things that we look for when we do deals. And there's things that we want to make sure that we kind of drive the bus from a decision-making perspective with the management team. But the really big differentiator for us, I think, in the market is we look for clearly identifiable operational transformation opportunities in all of the deals that we do. Now, that doesn't mean we are a distressed investor. What it means is we are looking for businesses at a strategic inflection point. We are looking businesses that have some form of operational complexity, undermanaged businesses. There is a segment of what we will do that is P&L turnarounds or balance sheet restructurings, but most of what we're doing today are healthier businesses that we feel like we can add some sort of value to help them go to the next level, to help them get a little bit sharper on price, to help them with sourcing, to help them with product design or customer segmentation or things like that. And then what we do is we have an internal operations team, which is filled as much with industry expertise, but more with functional expertise. And so we have people on our team, an expert in finance. We have an expert in cultural transformation. We have an expert in sourcing and product development and things like that. And then what we do is we bring in that expertise on a case-by-case basis, and then we look for ways that those people can add value to the business on a post-closing basis. What that generally means is two additional things. First is, from an industry perspective, there are some firms out there that they invest in businesses in a harvest case scenario where they are comfortable that the business is a melting ice cube, for example, and then they look at it and said, we're going to get a return through cash flowing the business, but there's not necessarily a significant amount of terminal value. We're not that type of investor. One of our key things is we look at the industry and we say, is this a flat or growing industry? Do we believe that the business has a reason to exist in the industry? And then if we do everything that we believe we can do with the business, then we know that we're putting ourselves in a position to succeed and that we'll be able to create a better foundation and long-term enterprise value. The third thing is top of the operational transformation. And because we invest across industry, we really look for deep industry expertise amongst the management team. Now, that doesn't mean that we invest in management teams necessarily in all situations. We're comfortable doing carve-outs, and we do a lot of those. We're comfortable if there's management team in transition, if it's an owner-operator that's looking to retire or transition out. But we look for at least one member of the management team that has deep industry expertise and has a Rolodex. And then we leverage that and bring our functional expertise as a way to basically build a cohesive investment plan and thesis with the go-forward management team for the business. The last thing I'll say is, based on this operational approach, from a situational perspective, a lot of what we do is corporate carve-outs and divestitures. If I look at the type of deals that we do, and if there's a bullseye for Transom Capital, it's the corporate carve-outs and the divestitures. And I think it makes sense for our strategy, right? Hands-on, value-added, internal operations team, and the corporate carve-outs, by definition, in almost every case, need a hands-on investor that can help build the foundation, do the carve-out, build the foundation going forward. A lot of the other type of deals that we do is we look at a lot of legacy assets and other private equity portfolios. We look at a lot of owner-operated businesses that are in transition. As I mentioned, we will do stuff, and are comfortable doing stuff that is a little bit heavier in complexity and roll up your sleeves. And so lender-driven processes, lender-owned processes, restructurings, and things like that. We've been very successful of those historically. But over the years, our ability to lean in and add value has really grown, where we're buying healthy businesses today, but just looking for areas where we feel we can differentiate ourselves by that value-added operational opportunity.
I'm curious about deal flow. We just came off a white-hot 2021 with record-setting deal flow and closings, and we're in the midsummer of 2022. What are you seeing in the marketplace from a deal flow perspective?
It's been really interesting, Jeff. We've spent a lot of time thinking about where Transom Capital sits in the marketplace. What are our sources of deal flow, and how has that evolved over the last couple of years? And I think what I would say is Transom Capital as a firm sources most of its deals through the brokered community. Because we're investing across industry, as opposed to having an industry-focused approach, we found that having a wide net and developing really strong relationships with many different types of investment banks, the large multinational ones, the smaller regionally focused ones, gives us the best opportunity to find the deals that fit our strategy. And then we supplement that through direct outreach to companies, direct outreach to corporates, and then some of the more off-market stuff like talking to lawyers, talking to other types of advisors and stuff like that. What we've seen that's been really interesting when we got into 2022 is, as everyone knows, 2021, by pretty much any watermark that you use, was a high point in terms of deal flow, a high point in terms of valuations, a high point in terms of businesses closing. You got into 2022, and what we saw, at least in first month to month and a half of the year, was a little bit of a catch your breath. And people were coming out of a really, really busy 2021. They were catching their breath and saying, okay, let's kind of look at it, look at where we are. Let's look at our pipeline, and let's look at see what we can bring to market for the remainder of the year and how that looks. We saw really good deal flow February and March. And then what you started to see is some of the cracks emerging in terms of supply chain challenges and other things like that, normalized EBITDA, COVID sort of receding in terms of pervasive impact on the marketplace a little bit, but you still had a lot of other challenges out there with businesses, especially businesses that you saw in like consumer, which we're dealing with unprecedented freight costs and things like that. And so you started to see a lot of businesses taking a step back and saying, hey, what do we want to do? Do we want to be coming to market in this environment? How do we want to be viewing things? And then on top of that, you had some of the inflationary impacts, some of the other turns in the economy, and you get to today, and there's a very strong sentiment when you talk to people in the marketplace that where the economy is certainly on a downturn, potentially entering into a recession. And there's a lot of concern now about what that means and should you be bringing your companies to market today. That being said, Transom Capital's model, where we're able to invest in more complex situations, we're able to roll up our sleeves and understand pro forma revenue add backs, or we're able to understand EBITDA add backs for things like supply chain or things like COVID headwinds or COVID tailwinds and other impacts on businesses, we've actually found that although there's a dip in the volume of deal flow in the marketplace, the quality of the deal flow for our model has actually increased pretty dramatically this year. And we're really excited about what that means going forward. In terms of a total volume, deal flow is definitely down compared to last year, but it's pretty consistent to 2020 and it's up compared to 2019. So we're actually feeling really, really good about the overall volume. But what we're really excited about is the quality of deal flow for Transom Capital in terms of the companies coming to market and some of the companies where maybe lenders are starting to think a little bit more about enforcing covenants. Starting the trillions of dollars that went into the market from the government has obviously tailed off and come to an end in almost all situations. And so a lot of those companies that maybe needed a buyer who could help them work through a strategic inflection point, or they have multiple business lines and they said, hey, how do we want to position our different business lines for success going forward? All of those things are really high quality situations for Transom Capital to be leaning into. So although there's an overall decline in volume in the market, we're expecting to see that decline going forward in the remainder of the year compared to at least last year. A lot of the stuff coming to market today is very well suited for our strategy. So there's a very strong silver lining to that from our perspective.
Ken, I know that Transom Capital is a hands-on investor. Do you have any sort of playbook that you run consistently with each of your investments, or what does that look like in your firm?
Yeah, no, interesting question. We do. And what we call it internally is the ARMOR value creation process. And ARMOR is an acronym that stands for acquisition, restructuring, monitoring operations, and return. We don't use that terminology a lot externally, to be totally honest, but what it is it's our kind of systematized approach that we've developed over the years that we say at each stage in the investment timeline, how can we be systematized, process-driven, detail-oriented to identify and add value at each step of the process. As I mentioned, it's called ARMOR, acquisition, restructuring, monitoring operations, and return. So the A of ARMOR is acquisition, as I just said. And really, it's a philosophy towards, as I was talking a little bit earlier about the sourcing of deals, it's our philosophy on how we approach the marketplace to deliver a message to the key people that have deal flow to make sure that we're identifying the things that will enable the rest of our systematized approach, right? And enable the rest of the ARMOR process. And then you move forward onto restructuring. And the restructuring, it isn't like, hey, we're doing a distressed deal and let's restructure the business. The R of restructuring is really active engagement with the management team out of the gates for the first 60 to 90 days to really execute against certain improvements that we've worked with the management team to identify through diligence, had a plan going into the deal, as opposed to buying a company and saying, okay, let's figure this out. What are we going to do? Through the diligence, we work with the team and have clearly identifiable opportunities, as I discussed earlier. And then we go after those hard in that first 60 to 90 days to really position the business for success going forward. The aggressive, putting in place the transformative, aggressive, identifiable, verifiable diligence items, working with the management team to put those into place. And then what you do is you get into the M and the O, which is the monitoring and the operations, which is really the long-term enterprise value creation drivers. So it's active engagement with the company to help them work on those key operational issues, to build a stronger foundation, to deliver outstanding financial performance, to deliver multiple expansion. Typically what that means is the operations team from Transom will be engaging as much as necessary, at sometimes daily or weekly, sometimes a little bit less often than that if the company is on kind of a glide track. But it's really that deep process improvement foundation, the implementation and completion of the cultural transformation opportunities that we identified and that we really kicked the start on during the restructuring process. This isn't a hands-off. We see the management team quarterly at the board meeting, and if there's a fire drill, then they're calling us more frequently than that. This is really being a value-added member of the team, being an extension of the management team, helping them with the thinking and the implementation of things so they can focus on driving the business going forward. And then we can be that value-added member, adding the incremental needs that they have. And then on the return, one of the phrases that we use is begin with the end in mind. So it's, if you go into a business and you have a clear vision about what you want to do, what your investment thesis is, and where you're going, then you will reach inflection points along the way where you can sit down with the management team and say, hey, we're at this inflection point, right? We had our plan going in. We've reached an inflection point. Is now a good time to sell? Or are there certain things that we can go after and it makes sense to hold it until we get to the next inflection point? And identifying early on who are potential acquirers in the business, what would they need or be looking for to buy this business? And then as we reach those inflection points, being nimble and ready to pivot into a sale process because we sort of had that perspective going into the deal as opposed to developing it as we went along.
Ken, earlier when we kicked off, you talked about your career path, and it's just so interesting hearing you talk. And I'm hearing a lot of analogies and things that clearly came from your school and your education, your early days in your career. And I know that you, like I do, have so many young professionals coming to you saying, hey, what would you do if you're in my shoes and they're 22 or something like that? And they want the answer, as you said. They want to know what one decision they should make today that is going to take them for the rest of their life. What are you telling folks right now that are coming to you asking that type of question?
The advice that I give people who are interested in getting into private equity, or more broadly, to be honest, of young men and women who come and just say, hey, I'm trying to think through what I'd want to do for my career, there's a couple key things that I like to talk to them about. I think one is it's really have belief in yourself. And what I mean by that is when we started Transom in 2008, and then as the firm has evolved and grown, most people have told us we're going to fail. We started the firm in 2008. It was during the very beginning of the Great Recession. We were a young group of managers that weren't a spin out from another firm. And pretty much everyone said, hey, you guys are going to fail. And what we basically said is, okay, we hear you, but we're going to prove you wrong. We're going to believe in ourselves and we're going to chart our own path. That is a key thing that I tell people is have a vision, go after the vision, and take input from other people. But a lot of people in the world are naysayers and that are going to tell you why something won't work or why something is going to fail. Don't listen to them if you have conviction and belief in what you're doing. You know, a other thing that I say is just in terms of the execution on a daily basis is most people that I've come across are problem identifiers. But the thing that makes people, I think, differentiate in what they do are the problem solvers. And so what I would say when it comes to that is work the problem, identify the problem, but more importantly, work the problem. Don't give up, come up with solutions, be a creative thinker, think outside the box, and don't stop until you found the best answer possible. And don't just identify and expect someone else, whether it's your boss, whether it's a colleague, whether it's someone under you, to solve the problem for you, but come with ideas on how to solve it. And cultivating that kind of critical thinking approach is a really important skill set to develop. The other thing is when it comes to the people around you, listen to what people have to say. Find mentors, find people to bounce ideas off of. Look at people who you admire or people who you respect and listen to their stories, not to copy necessarily what they do, but to help inform how you create your own path. Surround yourself with people that you think are as intelligent, if not more intelligent than you. For example, listen to them, leverage that, use it as data points to help cultivate your history. Look, I think on a daily basis, it's the blocking and tackling, right? It's act with an attention to detail, act with accountability, act with integrity, do all of those things necessary to work hard and create the role for yourself in what you want to do.
Well, I love that. And as you were talking and saying, listen to people, I think you've got to develop the skill to be a good question asker, because obviously you're not going to just sit with somebody and let them just talk on and on. And one of the greatest joys I have of doing this podcast is I get to talk to some of the most successful people in the private equity world like yourself and ask a few questions and get to listen. And that's been fun for me. But let me ask you a question as it relates to mentors. Two things there. One, I think one approach for young folks is when you go to senior people in the industry and you ask them good questions or you work for them, you solve problems and then take the solution to the boss and say, here's what I think, what do you think? that effectively many times will create a mentorship role when you don't even say, hey, would you be my mentor? Has there been anybody in your career that has been a mentor to you? And do you have any thoughts around that concept?
Over the years, I've given a lot of thought to who has most influenced the person I am today and who has helped me sort of cultivate and develop the characteristics and the traits that I feel like embody who I am, help me contribute to being a partner at Transom Capital has led to our success over the years. What's interesting is, there's people out there like, let's say, an Albert Einstein, right? Critical thinking, challenging the way people think about things, or a Steve Jobs, creative, visionary, thinking outside the box. George Washington, overcoming adversity, strong leadership skill. People like that I sort of say they inspire the way you think about things. But for me, really the people who've had the greatest influence on me are people that I know well or have worked with or have been close to and have really impacted me on a personal level and helped me develop things. Maybe to give you, a couple examples, I played competitive soccer growing up. I played up through high school. I played in college, and I had a couple coaches growing up. Their names were Derek Armstrong and Phil Kenny. And what they taught me through sport is teamwork, hard work, dedication, taking accountability for who you are personally, but most importantly, being member of a team and that the sum of the parts is stronger than any individual person. I've tried to take those learnings and apply them as well and give back. And so one of the things that I do is in terms of nonprofit, I'm involved in a couple different nonprofits, one of which is called Angel City Sports, which is an organization that works to provide athletic opportunity for the adaptive community, the physically enabled community. So think the Special Olympics, which is focused more on mental disability. We have a similar mission, but focused on physical disability. And what we found is that disabled individuals don't have access to sport on a daily basis. They don't have access to teams. They don't have access to gear. They don't have access to coaches. And if you think about sport, as I was just saying, in developing some of those key characteristics and helping you learn, one of the ways that I'm trying to give back and learning from some of the people who have inspired me is trying to give back and by providing some of the opportunities to people who don't have access as much as I had. That teamwork and things like that has been really a big contributor. On a personal standpoint, I mentioned early on that, my dad he's not retired, but he was a research biologist. He taught me very, very early on in my life about what I was talking about a little bit earlier, problem solving. Work the problem. Don't give up. Have a thesis. Find the data. Come to a conclusion. Pivot off of the conclusion. That hardcore analytical approach to what we do every day is something that my dad really influenced me and helped mentor me on. Another key characteristic that I try to live my life by is respect. My mom had a saying, you get more flies with honey than vinegar. And she used to say that to me a lot growing up. What she sort of taught me was treat people with the way that you'd want to be treated in return, and good things will present them to you in life. And that's something at Transom Capital that we've really tried to embrace, not only internally with the people that work here, but externally when we deal with people in the community, because you never know where the next opportunity is going to come from. You never know who's going to call who to say, hey, are these people that I should trust? And so really trying to live on a daily basis on that. My mom taught me very early on in terms of respecting other people. And then another key thing is integrity. But my wife she's been obviously with me, on this journey for many, many years. And she's talked to me a lot about the easiest decision isn't necessarily always the right decision. And if you go when James and Russ and I and the rest of the firm, if we're going out and we're making the best investment decisions that we can as fiduciaries on behalf of our investors, but that's not necessarily on a daily basis the easiest decisions. But if you're acting with integrity and you're looking to make the right decisions as steward of capital on behalf of our investors, that generally things will work out well in the end if you're acting with that utmost sense of integrity. So those are a couple, kind of influences that I've gotten out of my personal life. And then when I think professionally, I was a lawyer, as I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that I really learned through law school, as well as practicing as an attorney when I did, was that attention to detail, really digging into the facts. whether it's reading a legal document, whether it's reviewing a model, it's really digging into the facts. I mean, there was a gentleman who was a partner of Melvin and Meyer when I was there by the name of Ken Bishop. And he was like very instrumental in this for me. Is he was very hard on you, but he was very fair. And one of the things that he would really, really talk to me about is you're doing a negotiation, you're reading a document. Just because something is in there, why is it in there? Think about it. What is the detail associated with that? How can you improve that going forward? And I've really tried to take that to heart and listen to that as I've gone throughout my career. And then two of the people who have had the biggest influence on me in my life, to be totally honest, are my partners, James and Russ. We spend a significant amount of time together on a weekly, daily basis. We're partners in this business together. We're entrepreneurial. We have no safety net. And a couple of the characteristics that we talk about a lot and that they've really helped ingrain in me are accountability and perseverance. Accountability, set clear expectations for people, hold them accountable on following through. That doesn't always mean they're going to succeed, but having that sense of accountability, not only for ourselves individually and as a partnership group, but the people around us, I think has put us in good stead with people and has helped to build long-term relationships. And then the last thing maybe I'll mention is perseverance. I alluded to this earlier, but we started Transom Capital in 2008 as the sky was falling. We were a first-time team and a first-time fund. Everyone was telling us we were going to fail. We literally started the firm in someone's garage. All kidding aside, and people joke around about that, but we literally started it in a garage. We didn't have an office at the time. And what we learned over the years is just don't give up, keep working the problem, persevere, and good things will happen. And that a lot of people that you see, things get hard and they're unable to weather the storm and get to the best answer and see it through the end. And I think one of the things that Russ has really been instrumental and James has really been instrumental in with me is that really strong sense of perseverance and let's just stick with it. Let's just not give up. And we're going to make this work in the end.
As I listen to you talking the last couple of minutes here, it jumps out at me that you've been so blessed by being surrounded by so many great influences with a lot of impact on you and your career. But you have to also be the type of person you are that's open to all those different inputs and leaning into that. And this has been such a great conversation. I think the next question is almost going to seem obvious, or your answer should seem obvious, because everybody's heard your passion and your focus and what you're all about. But if I'm a CEO or a seller of a business, and obviously there's thousands of choices out there right now of people I can sell to or partner with, what are the key takeaway things that you want me to remember tonight as I'm maybe deciding between 2 or 3 potential buyers that I'll be able to remember and talk about with my decision makers who are going to help me decide tomorrow who I move forward with?
With Transom Capital, what you are going to get is you are going to get an owner of a business that is a partner in the truest sense of the word. We are going to be with you. We are going to enjoy the success. We are going to be in the weeds with you if there's challenges in the business, if there's an inflection point in the business, right? We have our internal operations team where we really have the ability for these middle market companies to lean in and add value. Now, there's a lot of firms that are very successful out there that have grown and are, multi-billion-dollar managers. But at the middle market, at the size of companies that we're buying today, there's just not a lot of people who have that internal expertise to really add value the way that we believe that we can with companies. I think on top of that, what you're going to get as well is you're going to get an ambitious, hardworking group that is there with you every step of the way, that is going to treat you with respect, but we're also going to hold you accountable at the same time. And because we're going to hold ourselves accountable for delivering the results for you that we're signing up to deliver to. And I think there's not a lot of people out there who can say that, but also deliver on it the way that I believe that we can. What's interesting, what we've seen over the years is that our biggest advocates are the bankers that we've done deals with. They're the CEOs of companies that we've owned and sold, right? And those are the people who come and say, hey, look, these are real people. They're young, they're ambitious, but they're also very good at what they do.
Ken, this has been a great podcast. I really appreciate your time today. And I know that our audience is going to very much enjoy getting to know you better and Transom Capital better. So thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jeff. Really, really appreciate the opportunity to come and join the podcast today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to North Star's Private Equity Fast Pitch. For more information about Fast Pitch or North Star's boutique heavy hitter events, you can visit us at enorthstar.com.